Long ago, before memory learned to keep time, the world was guided by gods and goddesses. They walked close to the earth then, and every breath, every birth, every death was placed under their watch. In those days existed a woman named Adizwa, known for her beauty and gentle nature. She was married to a strong and respected man, and together they built a home that should have been full of laughter. But death walked too closely beside them.
Adizwa gave birth to children who were healthy and whole, yet none of them stayed. Each child followed the same cruel pattern. Either they died at birth, or they lived just long enough to reach their third month. In her first pregnancy, the baby was born beautiful and strong, but it stopped breathing before sunset. Her second lived long enough to make Adizwa feel like a mother, before death took him exactly 3 months later. This pattern continued until her sixth birth. The women of Ilara no longer sang birth songs when Adizwa went into labor. They just arrived in silence, carrying burial cloth instead of ceremonial clothes. The older women said it was not many children that died, that it was one child who kept returning. An Agbanj spirit, bound to the world of the living but sworn to death. A child that entered the womb only to leave again. Some said the spirit fed on grief, which is why Adizwa was allowed to go through such continuous pain. Others said it was sent to punish Adizwa for a forgotten crime. When the sixth child died, the women acted before burial. They carved a mark into the small body, just below the collarbone. It was cut deep, cruel, and deliberate, so it would never fade. They said if the child returned again, they would know it was the spirit, and they would stop at this time. Adizwa did not cry as she watched her child buried. She had learned the pattern too well. When she conceived again, fear spread through Ilara. People whispered openly now and waited. When the seventh child was born, the midwife screamed. Beneath the baby girl's collarbone was the same mark, healed into the skin as though it had always belonged there. The women knew instantly that the Agbanj had returned. The baby did not cry much. She watched instead, her eyes too steady, too knowing for a newborn. Some said she should be taken into the forest and returned to the spirits who kept sending her back. Others argued she should be ended quickly, before she learned the world again and came back stronger. Adizwa refused every voice. She pressed the child to her chest and waited. When the baby lived past 3 days, Adizwa and her husband knew prayer alone would not save them. They were told of a priestess who could perform an Agbanj sealing ritual. A woman who knew how to summon Nyazira, the goddess of death. The ritual was prepared that night. Bitter herbs burned and ash was scattered across the floor. The women who came with Adizwa shifted uneasily, their eyes fixed on the child, for they feared that Nyazira would not have mercy and preserve the child. The goddess's law was known across Ilara. Death must come at its time. The dead must not be used. The living must remember the dead. When the priestess began to chant, the air grew cold. A wind gathered at the altar where the child lay. "This child belongs to death," a voice said. "She is born to die, and to return. That is her path." The priestess trembled, almost like she was unable to hold the ritual together. Adizwa moved forward on her knees and laid her forehead against the earth. She did not argue against fate or the words of the goddess. She just spoke desperately of the long nights she spends waiting for her child to die, of how her arms learnt loneliness and emptiness after carrying each child. She pleaded for the chance to be a mother, a chance to give her child a name, and be able to call out that name for a lifetime. She cried until her voice thinned and breathing felt like an effort. Nyazira listened to the woman's voice calmly. She was driven by pity, understanding the woman's situation. She knew it was not in her power to keep the child alive, but she could give her a breath of the gems which held her powers, in exchange for something of course. The child would live. The Agbanj cycle would end. But the girl would belong to death in another way. She would become a voice for the dead, gifted with songs only spirits could hear. She would guide the restless and the lost into the afterlife. If the agreement was ever broken, the child would die and never return. Adizwa agreed without hesitation. Nyazira bent close and breathed into the child. The mark burned once, then cooled, settling into the skin. They named her Abony, the one who was begged into the world. Abony never grew like other children in Ilara did. People counted her months the way they once counted her siblings. When she passed 3 months, then 6, then a year, the whispers changed. Some still called her cursed, while others said she had stolen the life meant for the children before her. She grew into a quiet girl who was beautiful, maybe a little too beautiful. She liked to sit alone and hum softly to herself. Her voice carried farther than it should have. The first time anyone noticed something wrong with her voice was when she was 12 years old. An old man lay dying, his breath shallow and strained. Outside his hut, Abony was found humming a distant song. No one had sent for her there, or told her the man was sick. When the song ended, the man died peacefully. People began to notice the pattern. Abony was always nearby when death came. Not inside the room or even close enough to touch the person. She was always close enough to be heard. Her songs were never loud nor sad. It sounded like someone guiding another person through darkness without rushing them. When the people asked why she sang, Abony only said she didn't know. She said the songs came to her when the air felt heavy, when her chest felt tight, or when she felt like someone was about to leave. The elders warned her to stop. Some said she was calling death, others said death was following her. Children were forbidden from walking with her. When someone fell sick, families chased her away with harsh words and stones. Sometimes she arrived before the sickness was known. Sometimes she was found sitting under a tree, singing softly, while inside a house someone struggled for breath. And when the song ended, the struggle ended too. By the time she was 15, people no longer argued about whether she was cursed. They simply knew that when Abony sang, someone would not see the next sunrise. But Abony never fully understood her powers until the day a boy collapsed by the stream. While others were trying to help the boy, Abony began to sing. When the boy finally died, the people turned on her, calling her a witch. That night, she began to learn to silence herself by biting on her tongue when she felt the urge to sing, but that didn't stop death from coming. Her quiet life was disrupted years later, when a child came running to find her. A powerful chief's father had fallen from a palm tree and had his back broken. The child cried that the old man's pain was unbearable, and that although the family brought in healers of all kinds, he was still suffering and not recovering. "Bring me the girl," the old man begged. "The one who sends people off without paying." The man's family had been angry at the request. How could he ask for death so lightly? However, after a few days, the chief realized it was only torture to keep him alive. He sent for Abony. When Abony arrived, the crowd had already gathered. The old man begged again to be sent away peacefully. She knelt beside him and sang softly. When the song ended, he was gone. The people watched her in silence. From that day on, Abony's name traveled beyond Ilara.
As Abony's fame spread through the human world, so did it spread across the spirit realm. The several gods and goddesses who maintained the order of the lands started taking note of the child whose voice soothed the dying. Amongst them was Chiron. He was in charge of the human desires and had access to the human mind. The first day Chiron heard her voice and watched as her songs lead the dead. He was intrigued, hence he started following her around unseen. However, Chiron was the same god who Nyazira had been in love with many centuries ago. Many years before Abony was born, the tales had it that Nyazira had been a goddess entrusted with choosing the time and manner of death for mortals. She walked freely among the living and the spirits, deciding who would leave the world, when and how. At that time, she had developed a strong relationship with Chiron, who she enjoyed roaming the human world with. However, one day, Chiron made a mistake that led to the endangerment of a human life. In a bid to help her lover, Nyazira broke the laws of death, which stated that she was not to get involved with living, except it was time for their death. The spirits of the realm punished her. She could no longer choose who lived or died. She was made a collector of the dead, bound to guide souls to the other world, but powerless to delay or hasten their end. He was the god appointed over the living breath of humans, the unseen hand that guided fate without touching it. When Nyazira was judged and bound by law, Chiron did not try to help her. He turned away from the spirit court, not arguing for her sake or defending her. He descended instead into the world of men, where choice was still allowed and desire had fewer consequences. Nyazira felt his absence more sharply than her punishment, but she endured in silence. Years later, Abony's birth changed the weight of her duty. The child's songs, gentle and strong, carried the dead safely to Nyazira's waiting hands. The goddess' burden eased, making Abony her favorite human. Abony had grown into her gift the way one grows into a shadow, always aware of it, never fully free from it. It was during this quiet, measured existence of her life that Chiron entered it. One day when she was gathering wood from her mother's farm, Chiron arrived in his human form. He came as a stranger from another land, asking her for directions. He said name was Taju and he had come to visit a relative at Alara and would be staying there for a while. After that day, Abony began to run into him almost all the time. At the stream, at the market, even at the square. He never asked her questions. Neither did he fear her powers like people did. At first, Abony rejected the company, since she was used to being on her own, but Chiron listened when she spoke. He laughed easily and walked beside her without watching the ground for omens. When people called her names, he asked why that was. Abony explained her birth to him and her role in the life of the dying. Chiron said he understood the burden she carried. He never asked her to sing and never mentioned the dead around her. For the first time, Abony felt unobserved and unjudged. With him, her chest felt lighter. The familiar pull that warned her when death was near softened whenever he was close. She thought it was peace, that she could finally be able to learn how to live. Slowly, without meaning to, she began to loosen her hold on the song. She hesitated when she felt the pull to sing. Sometimes while she was with Chiron, she would not want to leave. People began to suffer. Death still came, but it came loud and broken. Bodies fought when they should have rested. Souls did not cross safely to the underworld as they once had. They lingered, confused and uncollected. Abony did not understand what was wrong. Chiron told her she was tired, that she deserved rest. He told her the burden was never meant to be hers alone, that her body was probably just letting her know that the dead were not her ultimate duty. While she listened to him, Chiron began to collect the souls that did not cross over. He kept them chained, slowly building an army of the dead. Nyazira felt the change from the spirit realm. The dead began arriving late while some did not arrive at all. The order she had rebuilt through Abony's voice was bending and breaking. For the first time in years, Nyazira turned her full attention to the world of the living. She watched from the place where the dead gathered before crossing. She saw Abony standing by the riverbank, laughing softly at something the man beside her had said. She saw the way he stood too close, the way his presence dulled the air around her, and how the weight that usually pressed against Abony's chest was absent when he was near. When Nyazira drifted closer to them, she saw him, even wrapped under a human's body and walking under the sun like a man. She knew him. She recognized Chiron in a heartbeat, the one she had broken the law of death for, the one who left her to bear the sentence alone. She realized that this time he was not merely abandoning her for a human, he was stealing Abony's attention from her. From that realization, Nyazira raged. But she knew that her anger was enough to destroy the human world, hence, she did not rush forward or tear the sky. That kind of anger belonged to younger gods, not to one who had already been punished once. Nyazira withdrew instead, back into the narrow space where she had been. There, she tested the world carefully to see what was happening to the souls that never crossed over. Nyazira closed her eyes and turned her meditation deep towards the darkness. But all she saw was emptiness. She followed it like a trail until she found spirits circling Abony's path, confused and restless, unable to hear the song meant to guide them. Each time Chiron stood near the girl, the spirits recoiled, as if a veil had been pulled over their ears. Nyazira understood then that he was not silencing Abony by mistake. He was blocking her. Worse still, he was gathering the dead who were lost, holding them dead apart from the other side and bending them into his army. This was a crime against the order in the spiritual realm. Nyazira knew the dead must not be used. She knew Chiron had always had an ambition to take over the human world and the spirit realm, to become a ruler in both worlds. Now he was doing it through the child she had spared, the child whose breath still carried a fragment of her own. Nyazira knew that fighting him would cause chaos that could destroy the world, so she first began to send warnings to Abony, through the air and other natural forces around her. Chiron sensed her presence all the same. He began to stay closer to Abony, rarely leaving her side. When Abony complained of the air and the strange feeling she was getting, he spoke to her softly, reminding her how much burden she had carried for so long. He told her that the tightness in her chest was not a calling but a wound, that the dead had taken enough from her already. When she said she felt lighter around him, he smiled and said that was what peace felt like. Slowly, almost without noticing, Abony stopped feeling the pull of death entirely. When people fell ill nearby, she felt nothing. No song rose in her throat and no signs were sent to her. The truth reached her the day her mother fell sick. Adizwa had grown old quietly, her body thinning like cloth worn too often. When sickness took her, it came hard and fast. She lay curled on her mat, breath tearing through her chest, eyes wide with fear. Abony knelt beside her and tried to send her off peacefully like she always did to others. She opened her mouth, called for the song the way she always had, and found nothing. Her voice fell flat, dry and empty, as though something had been taken from her without her knowing. Panic seized her as she tried again, pressing her hands to her throat, forcing breath into sound. Still nothing. Chiron stepped forward, calm and untroubled. "Let her rest," he said. "She has suffered enough. She doesn't need pain anymore." Abony turned to him, confused. How was she to let her mother die without helping her cross over safely? At that moment, it was as though her eyes opened by a greater force. She saw her mother's soul join the army of other souls bound around Chiron. The dead stood behind him in silence, men, women, children all bound together by threads of stolen breath that led into Charon's hands. They were not crossing, they were trapped. Her heart dropped. She realized immediately that her dear friend was in fact a god transforming into a demon. "You took them," she whispered. "You stopped them from passing." Charon's expression changed. The warmth left his face. "Yes," he said simply, "and you helped me." Abony felt used and betrayed, but most of all, she felt a great fear of knowing her mother would never rest in peace if she did nothing. Crying out loud, she tried to sing as desperately as she could. The words began to form in her chest, but before she could begin singing, Chiron grabbed her throat, ordering her to be quiet or he would kill her instantly. At that moment, Nyazira knew she had to fight or let Abony die while Chiron destroyed the world. Nyazira rose from the earth itself, tall and terrible, her presence bending the world around her. "Release her," Nyazira commanded. Chiron laughed and pressed his hand harder round Abony's throat. "Step back," he said, "or she dies." Nyazira did not flinch. She knew he would kill her regardless. He was that cruel. She shot lightning at him, but Chiron raised his hands and commanded his army against Nyazira. Nyazira closed her eyes, and with her divine power, she began to summon souls from all corners of the earth. The ground cracked open as graves split. The summoned spirits stood at the back of the goddess waiting for her command. Chiron threw Abony out of his grasp and answered Nyazira's challenge by pushing his stolen army forward, wielding them as weapons, forcing souls into blades and shields. As Abony watched them fight, she knew the world would never be the same again. Tears pulled around her, weakened by the pain Chiron inflicted on her throat. With her last strength, she forced her throat to clear and she began to sing. Slow at first, but soon her voice was as loud as a talking drum. The song was so powerful that it became a tool, crashing through the battlefield, causing the dead to vanish one by one. Noticing what was happening, Chiron moved towards Abony to shut her up, and Nyazira took that opportunity to run through him with speed. They both collided, and as he made to strike back, she let the blow pass and sent him a thunderbolt that tore the stolen power from him. With a final cry, she cast him down. His form breaking as judgment pulled him away into nothingness. Turning around, she realized that the dead were all freed and safely crossed over, but Abony had collapsed from the singing. Nyazira gathered her in her arms, trembling. For the first time, she knew love not as possession, but as loss. The goddess knew she could no longer return to the spirit realm because she had broken another rule of death. She held the child in her arms and looked fondly at her before breathing her last gem into her. Abony breathed, coming back to life in a split second. But when she opened her eyes, she realized she was being held by the goddess who had once given her life. Nyazira was, however, fading away, slowly into nothingness. She smiled at Abony, who was already crying and calling out to the goddess to remain with her. "The cycle is broken," Nyazira whispered, touching Abony's cheek with a hand that felt like the coming of night. "You are no longer a child of Alara. You are the bridge." Nyazira's body thinned like smoke at dawn. The power that had once shaped endings and guided souls slipped from her form and passed fully into Abony. The goddess who had ruled death for centuries did not scream or resist. She only watched the girl breathe again, watched life return to the chest she had once marked for an ending. Abony clutched at her, sobbing, her voice breaking now not with song but grief. "Stay," she begged. "Please, I can still sing. I can still help." Nyazira smiled, and it was not the smile of a goddess, but of someone finally unburdened. "My time has come," she said softly, "and this time it comes as it should." Her hand rested over the mark beneath Abony's collarbone, the place where their pact had begun. "You were never meant to be owned by death," she continued. "You were meant to understand it, to walk where I could no longer walk." The wind went still as Nyazira faded completely, leaving no body behind, no shrine, no voice. Abony knelt alone in her mother's home, holding nothing but air. Her mother's corpse lay on the bed, untouched by the war that had happened there. The people of Alara gathered the next day and held a burial for Adizwa, the woman who gave birth to a spirit child. People say her husband took another wife after her death, but Abony never returned home after her mother was laid to rest. She did not take a husband or bear children. Time moved around her differently now. Seasons passed and she did not change. Her hair never grayed. Her face never aged. She became a quiet presence at the edge of things. When death came near, people felt it first as a hum in the wind. They said Abony walked the borders of the world, neither living nor dead. That she stood at crossroads when souls were confused. That she sang only when it was time and never a moment before. No one ever saw her take a life again. She only opened doors. The people of Alara did not build a shrine for Nyazira, but at crossroads, people placed stones in honor of her. At graves, they buried calabashes filled with water. They spoke her name quietly, not as a goddess, but as a warning and a memory, a reminder that even gods could love wrongly, and that love without balance could ruin worlds. And when elders told stories by firelight, they spoke of a girl who was begged into the world and stayed. And they also said that if you listened closely, on the night before you die, you might hear a distant humming, not to frighten you, but only to guide you home.